You're watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV from Toronto, Ontario. I'm Sami Said. Welcome to the show. Now, coming up, we have an interview with Cassidy, Caron, the president of the Métis National Council. But first, let's take a look at the headlines. British royal family seeks reconciliation with Indigenous people in Canada. Reported hate crimes in London, Ontario up 50% for second year in a row. Vancouver merchant fires back at graffiti taggers. Finland and Sweden submit membership applications to join NATO. And now the details. Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall have begun their three-day tour of Canada and Newfoundland and Labrador. Yesterday, Governor-General Mary Simon welcomed them in the provincial legislature in the Indigenous language, Inuktitut. Media record her as saying she asked the royal couple to listen to Indigenous people's stories while they are here. Prince Charles has observed in his speech, quote, "We must find new ways to come to terms with the darker and more difficult aspects of the past." The royal couple's tour will focus on reconciliation with Indigenous people. Many Indigenous leaders and residential school survivors want the Queen to apologize formally, as has Pope Francis. For the second year straight, the percentage of hate-related crimes and incidents reported to the police in London, Ontario is up by more than 50%. A report to the London Police Services Board finds that hate occurrences from 2017 to 2019 were around 60% per year. A spike in 2020 has been followed by another in 2021. Muslims, Blacks, and LGBTQ2+ were among the most frequently targeted. Nawaz Tahir, a litigation lawyer in the city, tells media sources that there is more hate out there, but that people are increasingly confident in reporting to the police. A merchant in Vancouver's Chinatown scrawls his own graffiti message on his store shutters to deliver a message to those who deface his shop daily. Tommy Wong, who has been selling his products for about 30 years now, finds messages like loser and useless graffitied on his store shutters almost every day. This month, Wong fired back. He sprayed a message to the taggers that reads, "Hey you, go find a job and make your day. What a shame of your life." He also wrote, "Your mom will be happy to see you found a job." City police report a 300% increase in graffiti vandalism cases in the area. Finland and Sweden officially submitted their membership bids to join the NATO military alliance today. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg calls the move a historic step in the alliance's history. He stressed that Sweden and Finland are NATO's closest partners, and their membership will increase our shared security. The move comes despite Russia's concerns that NATO enlargement would have destabilizing consequences for security in Europe. Long-standing NATO member Turkey has also voiced its objections, criticizing the two Nordic countries for tolerating and supporting terror groups. In order for a country to join NATO, unanimous approval of all 30 existing allied countries is required. That's it for the news. Now, reconciliation is a process decades in the working. However, we have seen increased mention of apologies recently with the Indigenous delegation to the Vatican. And to speak to us about this today is Cassidy Caron, the president of the Métis National Council. At just 29 years old, Cassidy is a nation builder, an entrepreneur, and a strong community advocate. Her goal is to promote effective collaboration and a deeper understanding between Indigenous peoples and all Canadians. Welcome to the show, Cassidy. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you so much.
Cassidy, I'd like to begin by asking about the Indigenous delegation to the Vatican. Now, most of the talks went on behind closed doors, but can you summarize some of the topics that were discussed?
Yes, so the Métis National Council brought an official delegation of 8 Métis citizens from all across the Métis Nation homeland. And our delegation was comprised mainly of residential school survivors, community members that represent the diversity of our communities, and representatives of the Métis Nation. And so our goal for our private encounter with Pope Francis was to really elevate the voices of Métis residential school survivors. So our private encounter was 1 hour long, and we really did give the majority of the time to the 3 Métis residential school survivors who traveled with us to share their personal stories of their experiences with residential schools, but also how they are moving forward in their healing journey. And the last part of the meeting, I delivered a statement, a message on behalf of the Métis Nation that was developed in collaboration with our delegation and with citizens from across the Métis Nation homeland. And, you
Mhm.
know, it was a private encounter. However, I firmly believe that there's no such thing as private meetings when you hold public office. And so everything that we did deliver to the Pope is available on our website in the form of the book that we actually left with the Pope with
Mhm.
many of our stories.
Mhm. Did you find this 1 hour encounter was long enough to discuss so many years of topics?
I mean, there's so much that can be discussed, and so long for people to start to understand the true pain that residential schools inflicted on children and their communities. We knew going into the meeting that 1 hour was not going to be enough time, so we spent a lot of time gathering as many stories from residential school survivors as we could to compile into a book to leave with the Pope so that he could have something that he could continue to share or to continue to reflect on. But, you know, the 1 hour with the three survivors that we had, we know that that was actually enough time for the Pope to start to understand what has happened and to really feel sorrow for what has taken place in the past. And I have no doubt that the words of those survivors impacted the Pope and really did compel him to make the apology that he did on April 1st.
And what did that apology mean for Indigenous Canadians?
So it means many different things for many different people. For the three survivors who were with us in person, who experienced that moment, it really meant a lot to them. For the Pope, the head of the Catholic Church, to truly acknowledge the role that residential school has played, the harms that were done, and that it has impacted our families even today through intergenerational trauma. It meant a lot to those survivors to feel their physical reaction to it was really, you know, it was a monumentous occasion. And so for some survivors back home in Canada who got to hear it again, for some, they needed that to continue down their pathway for healing. For others, the words that the Pope shared weren't strong enough because the Pope only did apologize on behalf of certain individuals within those schools, within residential schools, and not for the Catholic Church's role in in the harms that were done, the
Mhm.
institution itself. Um, there is more opportunity moving forward, though, when the Pope does come to Canada, that there is the chance of a stronger apology
Mhm.
and more commitment to action because a lot of our citizens also say that, of course, action needs to follow the words of apology if it is going to be truly meaningful.
Exactly. And I'll touch upon that in just a bit. But I want to ask, having not been there or being able to be in the room when this apology was happening, what was the feeling in that room? Because this apology has been in the making for so many decades. What would you say? Could you describe the feeling in that room when that apology was being delivered?
There was many different emotions, and different timing of the 1 hour general meeting. You know, there was certainly some harder moments when we were following along with the translation of what the Pope was saying. We had a pamphlet with all of the translations in there. When we got to the point that read, "I am very sorry," there, of course, there was a lot of tears in the room, but I think there was also a lot of hope, especially when, for us specifically, our two young people who fiddled, they our traditional music, our traditional tunes in front of the Pope, you know, that brought a lot of hope for me, especially, I think for the survivors who we were with as well. because it really shows the world that we are still here, regardless of all of these harms that have been inflicted upon our people and our communities. We are here. We are proud to be who we are. We are reclaiming our culture, our traditions, and especially through music. So that moment, that was really emotional for me to see our young people up there. I was so proud of them, and to be sitting between that young generation and then the generation of survivors who was on the other side of me, that was a really powerful moment. And it, for me, I have a lot of hope. There's a lot of incredible work happening in our communities right now, and we are moving forward.
And that description has moved me quite a bit as well. Now, although the Pope or the Vatican has released the dates and the cities that he will visit, the full schedule has not been determined. The Canadian Council of Catholic Bishops said that they will collaborate with Indigenous groups to plan out this schedule. How is that progress going?
So there's many moving pieces to this. It's my understanding that to plan a papal visit in this short amount of time is actually quite unheard of. I've heard that it takes typically 12 to 18 months to plan a papal visit, and I think we have less than 12 weeks to plan this. And so the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops is trying to determine the process of how we will be formally engaged in the consultations and the program planning. I do know that they are in communication with the local Indigenous organizations that are in Edmonton, Iqaluit, and Quebec City. And we will just continue to collaborate and coordinate as best as we can so that we can make these events as successful as possible for our survivors and for the families who would like to attend.
Mm-hmm. Now, Cassidy, my next question is a little bit more personal. You were appointed as the first female leader of the Métis National Council in November last year, and you replaced the president of 18 years. If you could give one message of hope or inspiration to all the youth watching, what would you say?
I think the best thing that I can say is that if you're passionate about creating change, then just do what makes you happy, what makes you passionate, do what you think is the right thing to do. You know, what I hope to represent is a different style of leadership. That leadership doesn't have to look or act a certain way, and that you can lead with kindness, compassion, and love, and really influence change in ways that has not been reflected to date.
Mm-hmm. And I'm so sorry that we have to stop right there, but unfortunately, that's all the time we have left for this interview. Thank you so much, Cassidy, for joining us and sharing a little bit about what happened with the Pope in the Vatican.
Thank you so much.
You were watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. That's it from our Toronto studios tonight. Make sure to share, like, and to subscribe to our channel for more Canadian Muslim content. Stay safe, and until next time.